Welcome to the Katalon Studio live training, day one session. So it's a brand new tool, and we had orientation session on day before yesterday. So the kind of we understood what is this tool is all about and what are the different features it offers. Even for a beginner, if you're an absolute beginner for automation, like say you have only manual testing, the UI and the features it offers in terms of without having much programming knowledge makes it stand apart from what we have been doing it in the last 5 to 6 years with Selenium. So because in terms of Selenium or most of the other program open source tools that we have used in the last couple of years, it was majorly the learning curve, the programming knowledge that you have to be expertise, be it a Java or C# or any other language. So and if you see the kind of expansion, like this is what we discussed in the last class. So we kind of understood what is this introduction to the Katalon Studio. So we'll go a little bit more detail into it, and we'll drill down more into the features of the Katalon Studio, what it offers. And I kind of related in the orientation session with like people who already know UFT and Selenium, how they can really understand where does the Katalon Studio stands. So it's the core library behind the Katalon Studio is Selenium library. That means if you already know Selenium, definitely it'll be an easy for you to learn it because you have already gone through the different library functions, be it related to an open browser, close browser, or click of a link, or you already understood the identification properties. But again, it's not just about the Selenium library. There are various other aspects of Katalon Studio that needs to be understood, which are easy to understood once you know those library functions. But why I'm putting UFT, because the kind of the UI and the kind of structure that they laid out for the Katalon Studio, we're going to see it in a couple of minutes today. That is majorly inherited from very user-friendly UI in terms of the UFT. So if you're there in the industry for like last 6 7 years, you would know features from UFT as well, features from Selenium. So putting together, that has been created a tool called Katalon Studio. But is that the only thing? That is mainly from a web application testing point of view. That is not the only thing. But again, we have seen the amount of mobile devices, the amount of testing around the devices has been evolved a lot in the last couple of years. So for that, again, we have an Appium library. So that Appium library is also part of the Katalon Studio. The other area generally when we wanted to test any application, right? So typically this is how any application gets tested, right? Uh, so you can categorize broadly any application that gets developed in today's world is all through Agile. And we know typically an application will have a 3-layer architecture. So one, the database, the core database for the application, whatever is the application that you have, be it a mobile application or a web application. So database is going to definitely plays a major role where you store all the customer information, records information, etc. And it has been majorly into a service oriented applications, because either you will consume the services from the existing applications on the other side, or your application will expose some of the services so that the other application will consume it. But it's majorly through, if you look into the middle layer or the business layer, generally what we call is majorly available in the form of a service. And then only comes to the need of UI. And now that UI can be a web application, or the UI can be from a mobile device that you're going to capture. But again, the middle layer business logic, the database layer is going to be the same. The only thing that is going to be different is the UI from where the customer is going to access the application. And we have seen the trend since it was all agile, not like a waterfall, where everything gets developed was the case in waterfall. But in agile, we go on an incremental basis and an iteration model. So you don't see all the things coming together, right? So what will happen is that maybe your developers have completed the DB design in one sprint, and then you'll have a DB also created with all the schema, the relational database with all the required tables has been created. So then what is the question for the testers basically, like what should we do at this particular stage? Should we wait until the middle layer gets developed and start testing, or should we wait even until the GUI gets developed and start testing? No, that's like a too late in the validation cycle, right? So what we'll do, we need some tools or we need some mechanism to help us in database testing directly. So that's where again, Katalon can help us. We can connect to the required database and we can verify the required schema of the tables, uh, push the data through our script, retrieve the data from the database through queries. So what we kind of learned it in Selenium, if at all anybody gone through the training of Selenium or UFT, what we did in terms of database testing, that is pretty much still we can do with Katalon Studio. The biggest important one again, apart from web testing, web application testing, mobile application testing, the other area which Katalon Studio offers and becoming popular is web services testing. So now let's assume the two components are ready. So now you have middle layer is connecting to the database and the database is retrieving the data and giving back to the service. If you cannot still get into the picture of service, let's say this is your application which are currently developing or and testing, let's say your company's application, maybe something related to this is my favorite example. If at all you heard it previously, just bear with me because this is well easily can go with the new people as well. Let's say you're building a travel application where people can book a ticket from place X to place Y for their upcoming vacation. Let's say the place X and here is a place Y, maybe in the same country or a different country. Now, what we wanted to also offer to the customer along with the booking of the ticket, we would like to provide some information about the destination. Like, let's say the travel dates are next week. So we would like to provide some information about the forecast of weather conditions in that particular week, how it is going to be. And also we would like to give any political information, most likely what is the current situation, or it could be the Forex information, maybe the foreign exchange information basically. Now this is your core product. This is your core product. But from where can I get the information of the weather situations or the political conditions or the Forex information? We are not building this information and we are not interested to build this also. But today's world is all of services. There could be a weather.com or accuweather.com kind of a website who will expose their services. Simply we can consume the services and we can display the information based on the corresponding dates the customer is willing to travel. Some of these services can be free of cost. Some of the services are paid services depending on the type of business that they offer. And the same case with Forex information. Again, there could be another website which will give you the country's foreign exchange rate, expected or current foreign exchange rate rather. So again, this is going to be a service from another system which we are consuming and displaying. Similarly, for the application that you are building or your organization is building, maybe you will have the services being developed and we don't need to wait until the UI to be ready and start validating on the UI. We can definitely do the web services testing. So that is where other area where you may be just a API test engineer or you may be a web service test engineer, and you might have either did it manually by calling the different methods. For example, in this case, right, in case of an AccuWeather.com, I might find methods like getting the weather information just by passing the destination location. There could be another thing by passing destination location plus expected dates from date which date. So there could be different methods through which I'll pass the parameter values and these methods will give the response. The same thing, you can validate it in a much better way through Katalon Studio, because the Katalon Studio has a capability to web services testing also. So we're going to definitely address this problem in different levels of it. One is on the DB side, one is on the service side. Now let's assume in one of the sprint, the latest sprint, your web, your developers have completed the development of the GUI as well. So now you have to definitely validate the end to end, from sending a request from the UI, going to the middle layer, going to the DB, performing the required DB queries or operations, retrieving the data back to the service, and then displaying onto the UI. So this is ultimately how our customers are going to use. This may be for other business point of view, or there could be some other teams in your organization or a different organization, and they have a different system through which they will call these services and try to get it. So ultimately, we as a test engineer, we need to verify at all the levels. What if somebody wants to consume only data? Because I'm responsible for mobile application testing, and there is another testing team who are responsible for web application testing team, but the DB is going to be same. So it's a shared responsibility when the DB only available, but when the service is available, it's purely the service team's responsibility to ensure the web services are working fine, and then coming on to the GUI. So in a way, Katalon Studio can offer web application testing, web services testing, mobile testing, and we already have either the Java program or the Groovy program that we are going to connect it to a database, so we can do database testing. And it can also help us in bit of performance metrics. I would not say this is completely a replacement for performance testing tools like LoadRunner or WebLoad or a JMeter, but it will definitely help us with some performance metrics in terms of when we run a test, what is the overall duration the test has been taken. If logically divided this script into 3 or 4 steps, it will give you the total time that is being taken by the test, and also individually each step how much the time has been taken. So it will help us in identifying the bottlenecks where the response time is slow. So in a way, a bit of performance metrics also will help us to calculate. So what they have done is, like, they looked at the overall industry problem. These are the different areas of the testing. These are the specializations of the testing, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. And they try to build a single studio, something like a Visual Studio test suite that you can call it, or the single suite of all these tests. And that's, they named it as a Katalon Studio. And again, we have seen in our discussions previously, just by doing the testing of the application won't be sufficient. You need to kind of run these scripts on a very scheduled way, on a daily builds or weekly builds or nightly builds. So these scripts needs to be tightly integrated into your pipeline, where the pipeline means right from the developers writing the code and building the system, deploying it into one of the environment, and then performing the unit or integration testing, and then deploying it into system testing environment, then running our automation tests, then automatically deploying it into the customer environment for user acceptance testing. And if at all they have any behavior driven development tests or acceptance driven development tests, running of those tests. So these entire activities are going to happen overnight or a weekly basis without any manual intervention. So we generally call it as the continuous integration, continuous deployment model. So then you need to understand not just the features of this application, but how can I, um, first of all, how can I maintain this code in a central repository? And in today's world, the popular, I don't know what should I call now. It was open source. It is still open source, but it was completely from an open source community till 2 days back. And we all know the story of Git, like Microsoft bought it 2 days back. So, so this is one of the popular open source that we have, where people kind of maintain all their code repositories. So we're going to look at how the Katalon Studio can connect to the Git, and whatever the code that we develop is going to be maintained into the central repository. That is what we're going to look at. And you might be already having a test case management tool or issue management tool like Jira, where you are maintaining all the bugs, all your agile user stories, the sprints information, etc. So the Katalon Studio will be able to connect to the Jira and retrieve the information or log the bugs for that, whatever it is failed. So one is we should be able to connect with Git for the repository management, Jira for the issue management, and then we have for this continuously running overnight or according to the schedule, we can integrate with Jenkins. This is called the continuous integration tool. So it can connect with the Jenkins and schedule our jobs. So in a way, you're going to get a full lifecycle picture from how we should start automating a typical web application or a mobile application. And then again, it has a various framework structures, like people who attended the orientation session one, the demo session, it can offer the data-driven framework. If you have to test an application with multiple records, we can do with keyword-driven framework. It has already a well-structured built-in keywords, and we can add our own keywords if there are anything that is not sufficient. In my view, they have really taken care of well almost all the keywords. But if you still need anything, that can be extended. So that's about the keyword-driven structure. And by default, they're trying to arrange the objects and the methods in the form of the page object model, which is again a popular with respect to the Selenium. So we can maintain the page object model with the Katalon. So all these things, like whatever we have been, there's a major learning curve and somebody has to really spend a good amount of time in practicing and creating these frameworks. Just out of the box, a tool comes with all these features and you have to just start using it. Okay. So these are some of the major advantages why anybody should learn a Katalon Studio. And I can definitely see the near trend is because we will not have that much, even if somebody is an expertise in writing the code in Selenium like Java, we don't have that much time in the agile sprint cycle. So all you have to do is something like quick and fast. Team is capable, but we don't have that much time to write. So now this tool brings us to add some, simple recording playback and in between adding some validations and performing it in multiple different browsers, multiple different operating systems. It's done. Okay, so let me go ahead and looking at the installation and the studio and some of the, so we're going to definitely look at some of the sample keywords and tests. Before we do that, let me take a few questions that are waiting in the chat. So one is how many total classes will be held for the Katalon Studio? Okay, so since it has all these many different features, right? One is the core web application testing. That itself, we have to understand what are the different functional keywords, functional validation keywords it has. How do you architecture your test into proper format? Then looking at some of these examples on DDT, KDF, page object model. How do you do exception handling? So that itself will take a good least to least, like 15 sessions, only the web application testing. And then we have web services testing, which can at least take another 5 sessions, properly understanding what are the types of web services that are available, calling them with the different parameters, how do you get the response back. And then we have mobile application testing. So, and then we have integration with all these repository tools like Git, Jira, Jenkins. So it's going to take at least, on an average, I would say like 25 sessions. Does Katalon Studio provide PDD like Ruby, Cucumber? So, okay. So they're definitely saying, okay, we can also see in the next step. So in a way, yes. but directly with Cucumber or some other tool, that I have to still look at it because I've not used that feature yet. But it has its own acceptance test driven model and behavior driven model. And what I know is majorly the Cucumber is popular. So at least we can make a call to the Cucumber test. That's what I'm guessing. But let me get back on that. Can it be integrated with Maven? Okay, so Maven purpose is basically for taking care of your build management and the jar file dependency management. See, that structure the Katalon Studio itself is trying to offer to you. Okay, so there's no separate need for connecting to the Maven like a structure. Okay, so that is kind of taken care in the Katalon Studio. But what is most important is to schedule your tests, triggering out the emails when gets run. So that is still a need of it. So that's why, and they don't want to build that all features into the same Katalon Studio. So they are direct because it's so popular. Jenkins, if anybody has used, you know. So that's why they are directly leveraging the features from Jenkins. Okay, this is one common question that we generally get it, not respect to Katalon Studio, but any automation. The question from Aparna is like, during the project development, can we develop test scripts in parallel even before the application is ready? So this is definitely one of the expectation, not even a challenge. I would say this is one of the basic expectation from your project management team and your customers, or your overall test management, that you should not be. Previously what we used to do is the very first version of the product, let's say V1, we used to majorly sign off with manual testing, and then we used to think about automation from the next version of it, let's say 1.1 or whatever. That was the case, but the expectation from the people and the industry is that why can't you start doing automation in the V1 itself? So it is pretty much possible. It's not because of Katalon Studio, but any automation tool, it is pretty much possible. Because if you understand typically how automation works, all we need is the unique locators information. If you have that locators information from your development team, that there is going to be a web page, and this web page will have few links here, and then there will be a table, and before that, let's say there are few radio buttons. If you know the different locators information and what is unique to it, especially the ID or the name, to which class name it belongs to in the HTML, what is a tag name, any of these unique informations, if you know more, I mean, it could be sometimes just the ID, sometimes a combination of the tag name and class name, or the XPath or CSS value. If we know what is going to come when they actually develop, that is good enough for us to write the script. Because once you understand the basic script format, uh, it is sufficient, just that we need the unique information. And once you have your script ready, when the first version gets released, you can start playing back against the same build. And obviously, there are few things which development team promised you that we will keep it in this way. And if they have changed it in any way, that script will fail. But other than that, the remaining steps should pass. So it is pretty much possible, just that, close coordination between the development team is required and the test team is required to know what properties, what controls that they are putting it in the application. All right, so any other questions before we looking at the system requirements, or basically how do you go about installing this Katalon Studio, and then maybe also looking at some of the UI features. Any other questions that you guys have? Cool. Since there are no questions, let me so here is the main website. and you can simply, if you want to start downloading it, you can download from here. But before that, I would like to look at some of the things like, okay, if services are still not available, but we should start testing. Again, the same story. So what we generally call it as the signature. Okay, signature in the sense we should have a clear understanding of how those services methods are going to be developed. For example, in case of the weather example that I've just explained, suppose a scenario is like get, you know, get weather by location. Let's say that is a method. Okay, the method name which they're going to put it like, I'm just taking an example. It's something like get weather by location. This is one method, right? So if that is a method, the parameter it would expect is the location name. So then as a test engineer, you should have prepared your test cases. What if I pass a valid state, valid location? What will happen if I pass invalid location? What will if I pass a location that we are not really currently does not exist in our database, but in the future we may serve. So you need to just prepare with all those different test cases as a scripts in your Katalon Studio or whichever the web services tool you're going to use, and you would know the kind of expected response from it. When I give a valid location, what I'm supposed to get, I'm going to get the weather information as an output. And if I give an invalid location, what I'm going to get, that I'm going to get an exception from here, or the location not found information back. So that is my expected behavior. So you can still be ready. All you need to know is what are the different methods that they are going to develop. And if they promise you this is a method which is going to come, and when you actually start executing it, if you're seeing a different method name, that's when the discrepancy will come and your test will fail. But that's more like you're not writing from the scratch at that time. It's more like just fixing it. So that's fine. I mean, we can do it that. It's not as bad as we are starting now. So does that answer your question? We can still be ready parallelly when the service is getting developed. Okay. Not really. Is mocking services available? Not really. Okay, so let's look at some of these. Uh, so it's as simple as like, you need to know web UI testing. This is a basic checklist if you wanted to do for a web application testing. The kind of environments which it supports. It supports the basic starting version of Internet Explorer 9, 10, 11 onwards, and the Edge browser, Firefox, Chrome. As of now, they are not supporting the Opera. This is the only limitation for now on the browser side. And we have Safari, the Safari versions 5.1. Okay, by the way, these are all categorized according to the Windows and Mac. So in a way, this indicates that it works both on the Windows and Mac, and even works on the Linux as well. So you may have a Linux server in your organization as a test lab, and you need to support it on that. It still works. And in case of mobile, the Android versions, the iOS versions, whether it will support the native app, yes or no. Hybrid, as of now, no. And then mobile browsers support is yes. So people who are into bit of mobile testing, you would understand what is this native app, hybrid app, and the corresponding browsers. So in case if you have, I think this is where we are going to start first, because that is a minimum requirement to get understand the tool and its features. So the environment setup for web testing. Uh, some of the basic settings that we have to do in the IE for recording and playback. So here are those basic settings. And again, people who know Selenium, they would understand the same settings we did it in Selenium if we wanted to run our scripts against the Internet Explorer. By default, since it's directly using the core Selenium library, so by default, the browser which is going to support is again a Firefox. Even when we try to record or when we try to play back, the default browser that it shows for us is the Firefox. But that doesn't mean only the Firefox is something that we have to live with it. You can run it on almost all the browsers where Selenium library supports. And these are some of the settings that we have seen with respect to Internet Explorer related issues. So all we need to do is we need to make these settings before we run the script. Okay. And in case of Chrome, some of these settings that we have to change in the tool preferences. We'll look into that one by one. So one thing that I wanted to look at was the, yeah, let me go back here. The same page. Cool. So they're just categorized into different things. Let's download it straight away and look at it, how the tool looks like, and then probably we can look into. And there are a couple of known issues or some of these limitations as of now. And there is the beta version is also currently under development. I have already started getting that the next version is available, so you want to install. So we'll see that. So if you want to install this or download this, so simply go over here and for the first time users, obviously, you will create an account. Okay. And as you can see, this is completely free. It is just to activate your product. And then you will create your account and start downloading it. Once you download it, if you remembered and worked with Eclipse, in the same way, it is going to, just a zip file is going to come to us and you can directly start working with that file. So I would have downloaded somewhere here. So yeah, when you download it, it comes something like this, Katalon Studio. And since my operating system is on a Windows operating system, and the kind of version 5.5 or 4.1, of course it comes as a zip file. You have to extract. Once you extract, this is how it generates. The direct way to launch the application is simply clicking on this Katalon icon. So at a high level, this is how the, okay, so this is what I was telling, right? So I have 5.4.1 and I'm already seeing a bit of slowness in the tool because they're already saying that we have fixed that in the 5.4.2. So ideally I should download that. Okay, I'll do that a little later. So for now, I'll say remind me later. So this is how the typical the tool looks like. So to get you familiar more of this, so here you have these options. If you have worked with Eclipse in terms of Selenium, you can see some of these options the way we have it in the Eclipse IDE that gets you. And here you can see if you want to directly start with a sample web testing project, web services testing project, and if you want to directly with mobile testing project. So these are the three major areas. But if you go to the more section, then you will get to know a little bit of more information what it can do. These are like Docker is again something similar to Jenkins for the continuous integration. And here you can find some of the sample scripts that have been recorded, a web services application related examples, on the API related examples, web application examples, and few sample projects as well. Here about the how you can go create about data driven test. Some of the examples generally people think it's most difficult, like how can I write a code for drag and drop. Some of those are given as part of this. So it's more like giving you some of the already sample projects or sample scripts that are available that you can find it over here. If you have worked on any of the recent projects that you would find it from here. So I would have just created some of these sample projects. So they are here. And in case of getting started, even if you're absolute beginner, have some idea about how an automation works. So they're trying to get you familiar with this in the UI pane. Uh, Here is the section that we're going to look at. So which is telling you these kind of icons are going to help you in recording your tests. This indicates for your web application. This indicates for your mobile application. And yeah, if you're already in recording, if you want to stop it. So the biggest advantage of this is it's going to help us in recording and playback. That's a major relief for any application automation tools. Even if you have a capability to write the code, that's what I was telling. It's not about the capability anymore, because with Selenium, people started definitely writing bits and pieces of Java code or C# code, even pure manual testers. So that is not the concern, but to write the code, to test the code, whether will you be having that sufficient time in the critical path of your agile cycle, because you have a 2 weeks of sprint, and the first 3 days you will get the time for you to write your test cases or plan a strategy how you want to go about testing. Maybe on the fourth day or fifth day you get a build from your first cut from your development team, and you should start jumping on to testing it. So you won't be really having a time to develop the scripts or enhance the scripts with some framework. So that's why you need a better frameworks. Already tools like this will make us faster, because we'll come to know just by recording how much the code is going to generate. All I have to do is in between add some validations or checkpoints, and that's sufficient. If simple, if I have to read the data from an Excel file, people who have gone through Selenium would understand that I need to download my Apache library files. I need to write a code to open the workbook, read the sheet, identify how many rows are there, how many columns are there, then read out each cell value. So the entire code that I have to do it. And here it's going to be a simple method for one single method call, and internally the code does for us. So that's the kind of time save that it's going to get us. So these are the options that are related for you to execute the test, which you can find it over here. And while executing, what can happen, how does the execution log looks like. So that information you can find, like open browser keyword took 14.40 seconds, click method took 0.647 seconds. And what are the different variables that you have used in the test? Like, username is being set to, by default, it's being set to something like John Doe in the code. Password is set to, this is not password, something of that. I mean, we look at some of the examples of the code. And you have some basic tutorial as well to get started, or user guide as well do that. Now, this is a test explorer in which, okay, okay, these are some of the icons. This is for us to connect the Git for the source code management, for checking in the code, check out the code, all that you will find it over here. And this icon, if you are familiar, it's from Jira for your agile management tool, lifecycle management tool. So we can connect to the Jira. Again, if somebody has to do that in Selenium, first of all, you have to understand what are the APIs that are exposed from the Jira, and the team needs to have the capability to write a Java code to call those API methods, and it's almost like completely developing new features. So they have really observed these problems over a period of time, what industry is facing, and they developed this tool basically. Okay, let me just if you want to go ahead and directly start doing it, so you can start with some of these like new sample project and what you want to do, like sample web testing, web UI project, or mobile project, or a web services project. So let's look at this sample project. Maybe you can give some name, you can give some description. If you remember, this is more like where I wanted to, in Eclipse, if you'd have seen the workspace, where do you want to maintain your tests, right? So I've just created one folder, and by default it goes there. If you want to have a new folder, you can create a new folder. This is in my users location, and click OK. So look at the way they are trying to organize the things. Now under Test Explorer, you can see all that information. All your test cases can be maintained here. It could be something like the main test cases for your application, or it could be something like the common test cases that you may need in multiple tests. For example, login is something that I need it in. Okay, it all depends on how do you want to organize. If you ask me like what is the best way to create a test case, the test case should be able to run independently without depending on the previous test, and the test case, even if I put it in a suite, also should be able to run. So that's how the individual test case should be. That means all the prerequisite for my test case, like logging in and log out from the application, should be taken care of in every test, and then the actual code that you wanted to do it. So again, when we were trying to do this in Selenium, people who know kind of relate, we used to write the codes aggregated into setup method, tear down method, and then in between, we were actually writing the code for what we wanted to do it. If you can do that way for every single test case, so then what will the advantage is? Tomorrow, if you have to mix and match and run it, let's say you have 100 test cases and you want to run the first 5 and then leave the 6th and 7th, and then you want to run the remaining one. So like that, if you want to mix and match, also should be able to run it, because every test case has its own prerequisite. That's like login and then log out, and in between you have the actual validation what you're trying to do. So that code is considered as a common test case, right? That you may want to call in every test case before you start doing it. And there is a code, something related to the pure test cases that they're trying to do, let's say successful login, successful making an appointment. It's a typical healthcare kind of a product. So this is a sample application. And we'll look into the code for a minute, but what is going to be most important is whether it is a common test case or main test case or any test case, on which objects that you are going to work in your application. For example, my web application might have 20 different locators. As I told you, there is a link and there is a text box that I have to enter the values, and there is a button that I have to click in. So there are different locators. All that locators, again, a very common term that people familiar in the industry is either you can call it as object or you can call it as locator. And the place where we were maintaining all these things is typically the industry known as object repository, especially people who migrated from UFT to Selenium, or if you know UFT, you can relate it very well. So that's called object repository. So they created the object repository here, and if you expand, you will get and look at the structure, how they maintaining it again. As a sample, how we should maintain it, or what is their recommendation. All the controls information from the login page should go under the folder called page login, and here is the objects information in that particular page. And similarly, the appointment page should have all the objects information of the appointment page should come over here. Like that, this is indirectly helping us understanding what is known as page object model, right? So for every single web page, whatever the locators information that you wanted to automate in Selenium, we used to maintain it in a page for every page. We used to write one separate class file for every page. So maintain all that information so that tomorrow, let's say this visiting date of basically, the appointment date or a visit date, the application has been decided to change it as an appointment date instead of visit date, because that makes more easy to understand. So then you don't need to really search in my 500 objects that I have, where does this visit date comes into picture. I'll straight away go to appointment confirmation page, and I'll straight away go to this visit date, and then I'll change this information. So that's the advantage that we have seen in the page object model, which will carry. And you can organize your tests into sanity test suite, regression test suite, or end-to-end test suite. So you can categorize that. Any test data files. So for example, you have some, you want to run this appointments page, or you want to validate this appointments page with some 100 different records, and you all have that records in a text file, or not text file, let's say CSV file or a Excel file, or it's there in one of the existing database. So that information can be maintained it here. Where is my uh, test data file? Be the Excel file, be the CSV file, or a DB file, or XML file. Again, if you've already experienced this data-driven framework or keyword-driven framework with us, or any part of your learning in Selenium, within the project structure, you would maintain this one folder like test data files, and you maintain there, and you'll call that in your programming. And if any checkpoints that we would have created, so something related to page checkpoint, or something related to an object-based checkpoint, whether the object is enabled or disabled or clickable or not clickable, or all the links in my web page are working or broken, any of the links. So such kind of checkpoints, accessibility related checkpoints. So the checkpoints can be maintained here. The beautiful thing, the most important thing is the keywords. Like, let me show you. Okay, we'll come to this keywords browser a little later. All the keywords that you have used in your programming will come over here, but all the predefined keywords from the tool also again well structured and well maintained, that we can look at it. Again, if you know TestNG listeners, if you have worked with Selenium and if you have used TestNG framework, there are few listeners which will just keep on listening to your tests, and based on the response that you heard it from the listener, you wanted to take some actions. So those listeners can go over here. The reports and any of the profiles that you wanted to maintain, so that should be here. If you just look at some of the tests, for example, let's say I'll open the login test, and this is how the code looks like. By default, it will open in, so if you look into the bottom, there are different tabs: manual tab, script tab, variables tab, integration, and properties tab. And then you have, for adding the steps, you have options here. What are the different recent keywords that are being used here? If you want to delete any step, or if you wanted to rearrange the steps like move up, move down, you have the options here. So some of these you would be definitely familiar, right? Say the keywords. This is like a click keyword. set text keyword, again a click keyword, and something like verify element present. If the simple thing that you wanted to do in Selenium, verify element present, you have to write at least 4 lines of code, 4 to 5 lines of code, because the element present method will return you a Boolean value, 0 or false, and based on the 0 or false, what you wanted to return, what you wanted to say the result of the test case, you should write at least 4 or 5 lines of code. And this is available for you as a simple keyword. Again, I'm sure people work with any automation, they're familiar with keyword driven framework, but otherwise, don't worry. When we start the actual sessions, we'll first talk about what is keyword driven framework and what is going to be a major important in this, all the keywords that you're going to use, the objects on which you're going to work, what is the input that you're going to input to the application, and what is your basic output. So based on these keywords, internally it calls the corresponding methods. The actual Selenium method could be different for a click or set text. Like set text, the actual keyword that anybody knows Selenium can relate. So we used to first identify the object on which we want to set the value. Then we used to have a method called send keys, right? Identify the locator with the different mechanisms, whatever. Here I'm giving the username. So this is considered as an ID basically here. So we'll identify that object with the ID by .id, and then we will use the method send keys to set the value. So that all is automatically taken care in one line or one keyword called set text. So everything is majorly happens through keyword driven structure. So this is a manual. So if somebody wants to not really familiar with the programming, they simply go here, look at the keywords, how they have categorized. What is the next thing that you wanted to do? You want to add a web UI keyword or a mobile related keyword or a web services keyword, or you have built some custom keyword and you wanted to add it, or there is a keyword to call one test case in another, because this common test case is login is there, and that login you wanted to call in other tests, then we need a keyword for that. So we have something like call test case. Or the next step is to write some conditional statements like if statement or else statement, switch statement, case statement, or a default statement. Or next, maybe you need to write some loop statement, for loop or a while loop, or you may need to write some branch statement, right? Or you may need to do something, an exception handling, try catch, or a binary statement, maybe simple assertion with expected and actual value. Or there is a method that you know and you want to call that method. So even if you're not familiar with any programming, these are good enough to basically to write your code or write the script. For the people who already know programming, any programming, here is the editor. And again, if you familiar with qtp or UFT, we used to have something called tree view and expert view. So tree view is something like what I've showed you in the manual view, and the expert view is for the programmers. And here you can see the by default any web test that you select, automatically this uh, and again based on the keywords that you start adding, a lot of packages will get imported. Again, people who are familiar with Selenium can understand what is a package and how it does it, but you don't need to worry about this, because again, even if you start understanding, it's not so easy, because how they have tried to categorize into different packages in the development of the Katalon Studio, and based on those packages and the libraries they're trying to add, not so easy for us to understand, and which is completely black box. We don't need it. Is abstracted from the user. And that's why by default they're just collapsing this, and you just see one import statement. Okay, what is matters for us, the core automation test engineer, or somebody wants to gain knowledge on this is, let me close this, it's open for some time. Okay, so here in case of a web application, all you have to do is, so the web UI is the basic one, and the moment you have the web UI, then you can see the keywords that you wanted to do. Just put a dot, and then you have the keywords in the form of Groovy language coming up for you. You'll choose the built-in keywords, and then the defending operation. For example, we need to just, okay, I think it's taken as completely that. Something related to keyword driven main, WebDriver type. Okay, so the web UI is something that you have to start with it first, and then you will be able to see the corresponding keywords available. So just trying to get familiar, the first step is to click on some control. So you have this click method, then how it is going to identify the locator on which I'm going to perform these operations. So they have created a method, a predefined method called find test object, because we know um, the concept of test object and run object, right? When you created all the object repository information, in typically whatever is there in object repository, that objects we call it as test object. Okay, and the object on which you're going to play back on your application under test. Again, this terminology is coming from UFT, so if you know, you'll relate it, otherwise don't worry much. Test object is nothing but an object in my object repository, and the run object is nothing but object on my application. So let's say I'm trying to say there is a button called make appointment button in the home page itself. Okay, so here is the hierarchy for the control. Page Cura home page is the home page name, and within that it has a button called make appointment. So it keeps separating the hierarchy of the objects. Let's say you have a home object, and then you have another object or a page, and then you have an object. So it just keeps separating with slash. That's a kind of a syntax. So you're giving this complete hierarchy of the object information, which is the test object information. So it calls a method in the Katalon Studio called find test object. Then internally what it will try to do is they will read this information. Okay, there is a parent object and there is a child object. So within this page called home page, Cura home page, if they find the make appointment button, that means let's say this page is home page. And under this home page, let's say we have this button called make appointment. Okay, so run object is matched with required information. So they're going to corresponding to the test object in your object repository. You found the corresponding object on the application. So then they're going to perform this operation called click. Like that, the next line is basically entering the value within the login page. There is a control called username, and the same login page, there is a control called password. Now this is variable. So you can see the variables from here. Username of a type string, and this is going to be the value. Default value is John Doe. Password, it's a string value, and here is a default password. So when I run it, whatever is a value that is there in username, that is John Doe, will be set onto the username text field in the login page. The password value, this is not the password, goes to the text password in the login page. And finally, again, there is a login button which we're going to click. So it is as simple as that. And after that, your expected thing is, once we click on it, what is my expected behavior? The expected behavior is that there is an expected value, right? So in the web UI, we're going to verify if there is an element present, and that is uh, of type HTML tag called div. It's not a button, it's not a link, it's not a text box, but it is of type. Again, we'll have to understand a little bit of document object model when we start with HTML. Any web application will have these HTML tags, right? Button, like links are identified with anchor tag A. Like that, we have div tag. So if you find this appointment object, that means you are in the right place. Then we're also, because we are looking for the verify element present, that may or may not be there, right? So you have to give some timeout, global timeout. Again, in Selenium, we have seen this explicit time, implicit time. So depending on the time that you provide, it will wait and see if that element is present. If that is present, then you will get something like a true value here. Otherwise, you will get something like a false value here. You can see it's a Boolean value. So this is how the programming is going to be. And after that, you can write a simple if condition. If this is true, my test case is passed, else my test case is failed. All right, so just to give you a glimpse of how the code is going to look like, and to look at all the keywords, this is how, look at how nicely they organized all the keywords. Built-in keywords, things related to web, you have all the keywords here. Again, categorization. Browser-related keywords are here, open browser, close browser, navigate to a URL, delete all the cookies. I don't know how many of you have written this. If you have to write this on your Selenium code, you will spend a good amount of time in doing that. Wait for jQuery to load, wait for the page to load, refreshing, navigating to a URL, forward, backward, all that like comes under the browser. And again, if you have learned Selenium in depth, we have discussed all these things in our course, like how to deal with checkbox, combo box, images, different text box, windows, and even advanced concepts we understood like alerts. What will you do when an alert comes in your web application, right? So whether you want to accept the alert, dismiss the alert, if there is a text you want to get that alert, or some kind of alert boxes will, you have to enter the value. So setting the value, verify alert present, not present. So all these things you have to spend a good amount of time in writing the code to do achieve all that. All this is available for you as a keyword now. So these are web UI, and if you have something frames, again we worked with frames, forms, right? How do you work with the different utilities? So all that is there, categorization under web UI keyword. Then you have web services related. Then you have mobile related. Then there are some custom keywords if you want to build how you should do. And like decision making statements, loop statements, which I just showed you. So this is how they have organized nicely. And if you want to put any object properties, how if you want to add, you can add it from here. So keyword browser, properties browser. All right, so typically this is how easy it's going to be. That's all I can say, because things are already, and then we can start searching any of the existing ones. If you wanted to see only test cases, you can see only test cases. Or if you wanted to just search on, let's say I want to search for login test case, just put it, it'll identify from the entire explorer. Do you have any test cases with login or object repository with login? All that matches will be identified so easily. So very user friendly, and we're going to look at each of these options one by one, get familiar with the tool. If you want to do a debugging of your, debug your program, how you should do it. All right, so I would like to spend the next 5 to 10 minutes taking up mostly the questions, because there's no point in continuing it as part of the orientation, getting into any of them, but rather I would like to address some of the concerns or questions that you have before we start with full-fledged training soon. Any questions? I think about the time, the duration, some of those things I've already addressed, and the knowledge point of view, you can be an absolute beginner. If you don't know anything about an automation, that's fine. We'll take care of it. If you already know any of them, QTP or UFT, you will understand it a bit easily. But again, don't get biased with any of that. I'll take care of it like from the scratch. Will we be doing any real-time projects? So if you're again a member of iTeLearn, you would know the way we do it. Any codes that we generally do, training will be there, and post that, depending on the membership again. So we will have live projects going on, like currently Selenium live project is going on. So the Vakas INC, Kartik owns, has a couple of live projects, so which you can get to start, testing of those, creating the scripts for your Katalon or Selenium or UFT, whatever we teach. Can we configure running in multiple environments? That's a simple configuration, I would say. So what happens is that, let's say if this application is going to go to some URL, something like, say, katalon.uat.com or katalon.production.com or katalon.st.com. Let's say the URL is like that. It's a simple configuration variable. And depending on today's need, suppose if you have to run it today in UAT, you can point to that and run it. So it's configurable. What is starting time, starting date or time, basically? Okay, time is going to be the same time, pretty much. The way we started, like 5:45 p.m. PST. It's just that, to be frank, it's my availability. Like I'll just rush to the office post this session, and so considering that 5:45 p.m. PST. But do reach out to the team. Let us know your requirement, and the team will get back to you the best possible option. So we are looking at around 25 sessions for all these features: web application testing, mobile testing, web services testing, integration with GitHub, Jira. So there's so many things are there. So it takes time in terms of learning, and you have to spend at least an hour after that in practicing it. So we are looking at around 75-minute session, 80-minute session with questions, answers, etc. Push that you need to spend another 1 hour. Um, just do watch out some of our other videos on Selenium, UFT, if at all you're new to iTeLearn, the way we handle the in-depth, so that will give you more idea. All right, so any other questions? Cool. That's it for the day one point of view. So we'll get back to you with the exact date in a daytime. But we're not looking at any long. We're going to start it soon, as soon as like next week itself. So yeah, just get familiar with orientation in the day one. Thanks everyone. Thanks for attending the session. Have a good day or good evening. Bye.